everyone, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club and welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to continue with our solo playthrough of War of the Ring. This is episode 3. To this point we've had some interesting developments. The Free People's player have brought the Ents into the fray. Shadow player currently has the Corsairs of Umbar and the Hillmen of Dunland activated. All the nations, with the exception of the dwarves, are at war. Fellowship progress track is at 4. We have 1 corruption, and the last known position of the Fellowship is at Rivendell. There are several interesting cards that are on the table. We have a Power Too Great, and that is going to prevent the Shadow player from attacking any of the elves unless that card is dealt with, and that's quite expensive for the Shadow player to get rid of. He has to discard a die of any type, and then an army and character event. The same token we have not on anybody's side, and that's going to prevent the Ents and Eagles from using any of their call to battle cards, and that will have to be dealt with by the Free Peoples. Then we have the Armed by Saruman card is in play, and that's going to allow the Dunlandings to act as Shadow Army units if they use call to battle effects. And then finally we have Saruman is a neighbor, and that is if Saruman will use his Voice of Saruman ability, we can take one of the Ents off the card and place it in Fanghorn Forest. Shadow player has made an amphibious invasion in Pelagar, and they've captured that. And the first army has captured Osgiliath, so they are going to be eyeing Minas Tirith very soon. In the Dal Guldur region, we've got the second army on the doorstep of Lorien, but Shadow will have to deal with a Power Too Great card before they'll be able to attack. We'll prepare for our next round and we'll collect our action dice. Free Peoples have 5 action dice with the addition of Gandalf the White. They also have a faction die. Shadow player has 8 dice, the Balrog die, and a faction die. Free People's player draw the events Mithril Coat and Sting, Book of Marzabul, and the Dark Door. They'll be able to keep the standard events, but they're going to be over the hand limit with the faction events, so we'll have to discard one of those. And I think we're going to discard the Dark Door. Keep the other faction events we have. Shadow player drew his events. He has a total of 7 standard events and 4 faction events, so we have to discard a random card, and we've selected this one. That'll be placed in the discard. Move on to the Fellowship phase, and once again we have a progress of 4 with 1 corruption. Last known position is Rivendell, and Strider is the guide. Shadow player will take care of his hunt allocation, +1 to the die. Result is an 11, that's modified to a 12, and that is going to be 2 dice in the hunt box. And now we'll make our faction event rolls. Here is the Free Peoples. Alright, they have rolled a Will of the West, 2 Will of the West. Character die, 2 event dice, and a play or draw faction event card. Okay, so that is what the Free Peoples will have for the coming turn. Now the Shadow player's action roll. Okay, he rolls an army, a muster, another eye, so we'll add a 3rd eye to the hunt box. 2 event dice, character die, and a wild for the faction event. I'll have to look up what this one is for the Balrog. And that Balrog die is a card draw die, so we can draw from either the character or the strategy deck. Incidentally, the Shadow player has accumulated 1 victory point. We have none at the moment. These are the dice and cards that we have available. Shadow player has 7 dice, so we can either pass or play one of the dice. I think we're going to use one of our event dice, and we're going to get rid of the not on anyone's side remains in play card. The card says the Free People's player can force not on anyone's side to be discarded by using a Will of the West action die result or any action die if Gandalf the White is in play, and he is. So we're going to use that die and we'll get rid of the card. Shadow player is up and will make a roll on his gaze table. We have a +1 dice roll modifier. Result is a 16 modified to a 17, and that's going to be Hunt for the Ring. We'll begin by taking a look at our character event cards, and we'll see if there's any that we can play. It's hard to play those when the Fellowship is still in Rivendell. You don't get many opportunities. None of the character events will apply at this point, so I think all we can do is try to position some forces where we can maybe get some Hunt rerolls in the future. Right now the Fellowship is at a progress of 4, and they'll likely go to 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They could be in Lorien with another advancement. They took the high pass. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'd be in Gladden Fields. All right. I think they'll play an army die, and they're going to make a couple of movements. I think we'll move one regular into Gladden Fields and one regular from the Fords of Brunnen into Holland. We'll do that. All right, the Free Peoples are up next. I think we're going to use our event die, and we're going to play the card Mithril, Coat, and Sting. And that says play on the table. After the Shadow player draws a Hunt tile, you may discard Mithril, Coat, and Sting to draw a second tile. Apply the effects of the second tile instead of the first, and then return the first tile to the Hunt pool. So we'll do that. Give us a little protection. Shadow player is up next, and he'll make his roll in the gaze table +1 for the Fellowship in Rivendell and less than 5 on the progress track. Roll is a 7 that's modified to an 8, and that is military matters. So they'll be rolling on the military table. This will tell us where their focus lies. Result is a 4, and that's Angmar or Ruin. All right. I think we're going to select Ruin as our target, and we're going to use a muster die, and we're going to do some recruiting for them. And they're going to recruit a regular in North Ruin and another one in South Ruin. Free Peoples are up next, and I think what we'll do is we're going to use a Will of the West die, and we're going to convert that into an army die. I should say a muster die. And we're going to play that event, Book of Marzabal. Move any or all companions who are not in the Fellowship. Then, if a companion is in Erebor or Eredluin, activate the Dwarven Nation and move it directly to at war. Well, we're going to move some of our companions that are in Fanghorn. So we'll play that Book of Marzabal, and we're going to move Gandalf the White. He's going to move, I think, into Helm's Deep. So we'll have him move 1 and 2 there. And then we've got Boromir, and I think we'll have him move, trying to get to Minas Tirith. So we'll have him move 1 and 2 into the Druiden Forest. We'll leave Merry in Fanghorn for the moment. All right, Shadow player is up next. Here is their roll with a +1 on the gaze table. They rolled a 15. That is modified to a 16. And that is going to be the Hunt for the Ring again. Well, there isn't too much we can do to hunt for the ring at this point, other than possibly using a character die, and we'll activate our forces in Moria, and I think we'll move them. And I think the best thing we can do is move that force into Dimril Dale, so I guess we will move a Nazgul and 2 regulars into Dimril Dale, and we'll add them to the second army. That is going to give them 2 Nazgul, 6 regulars, and an elite. All right. Free Peoples are up next, and I think we'll use this character die and get the Fellowship moving. We'll play the character die and we'll advance the fellowship. Now they're up to 5, so there won't be any die roll modifiers for that anymore. And now the hunt will occur. Shadow player has 3 eyes in the hunt box. And here's the hunt roll. And they have 1 success, so they'll be drawing a hunt tile. And the hunt tile draw is a Smeagol token. All right, so Smeagol is going to become the guide for the moment. So Smeagol, the tamed wretch, is now going to be the guide of the fellowship. We'll place his card on top. And it says, Smeagol is always the guide of the fellowship. If Smeagol hunt tile is drawn from the hunt pool, the hunt damage is 0. Discard Smeagol if he is separated from the fellowship or the fellowship is declared in an unconquered free people city or stronghold. If Smeagol is eliminated or discarded in any way, except being replaced by Gollum, the event card We Shall Get It immediately enters play. All right, Shadow player is up next. He's got 4 action dice, and we'll be making a gaze roll. There's no longer +1 modifier. Fellowship progress is at 5. Result is a 12, and that's going to be military matters, and we'll roll on the military chart. Result is a 7, and that is Dal Guldur and Moria. All right. Well, the Shadow player has to get rid of that power too great. So they're going to use an event die, and they're going to sacrifice a random character and army card to get rid of that card. It's very expensive. But those cards now will be discarded, and we've freed ourselves from that block against the elves. Free Peoples are up next, and we're going to use this Ents Awaken card. And we're going to play a faction event die to play a card, and it says the Ents Awaken. Recruit 1 Ent figure in the Entwood. Then place 1 faction event card, or then play 1 faction event card, or reshuffle all Ent faction event cards, including this one, from the discard pile into the deck. All right, well, we're going to play a faction event then. So we're going to add our Ent to the Entwood. So we'll add a 4th Ent, and we're going to play another card. It's going to be the March of the Ents. And that says, take an Ent figure from the Entwood to march the Ents, or eliminate an Ent figure from the Entwood to attack a shadow army, rolling 3 dice and scoring hits for each 4+. You may repeat these 2 actions multiple times in any order. We'll do that. And I think we're going to eliminate an Ent and launch an attack into the Fords of Isen. So we're going to get 3 dice for that, and we're looking for 4s or greater. All right, here's the dice roll. They have 2 hits. They've got a 6 and a 4. So that'll eliminate 2 of Saruman's units in the Fords of Isen. Those will go back into the force pool. And I think we're going to repeat that. We're going to get another Ent out, and we're going to repeat that attack per the card. See if we can do some damage to Saruman. Okay, here's the next roll. And they've got 2 hits, a 5 and a 4. They're going to take 2 more out of the Fords of Isen. The Ents are doing some serious damage. All right, we can repeat that one more time. We'd have to lose another Ent, though, to do it, but we'd be able to get rid of that elite unit, maybe. I think we'll do it. Get rid of another Ent, and then we'll make another roll. They've got the hit. They've got a 5, and that'll take care of the elite Saruman unit in the Fords of Isen. Now that is open. Last time that was controlled by the Shadow players. We'll place a control marker there, but that was a good attack for the Ents. All right, the Shadow player is up next. Here is his gaze roll. Result is a 3. That's going to be Isengard. All right. All right, poor old Saruman there is a little open. There's no armies around in Orthanc, so we'll have to see what we're going to do here. I'll check the event cards first and see if there's any that will apply to Isengard. No, there are no event cards that will apply, so I think we're going to have to take some desperate measures here. I think Saruman is going to use an event die, and he's going to use one of the elven rings to convert that into a muster die. And he has to get some troops in there. So I think he will use his Voice of Saruman, and that will allow him to place one regular in each settlement. So we'll put one in Orthanc, one in South Dunland, and one in North Dunland. All right. Free Peoples are up next. They have a Will of the West die. And I think the best thing we can do here is use that as an army die, and we'll make some movements. Saruman is exposed, so I'm going to use that army die to move an army, and we're going to move, I think, this entire force, including Gandalf the White, into the Fords of Isen, and we're going to recapture that. That's the first one. I think the next move will be to move this elven force from South Ered Luin into Cardolan, and Pippin is there. Is that Pippin? No, it's Merry. Merry is there. Okay. All right, the Shadow player has 2 action dice left. Here's the roll. They've rolled a 6, and that is going to be Isengard. All right. Well, I think they're going to use that wild faction die, and we'll see if they can maybe get the Dunlandings moving. Well, Saruman needs help, so I think we're going to recruit a Dunlanding in Orthanc. Our choices would be to recruit one in each Dunland settlement, or one inside a shadow army in Isengard or Rohan. So we're going to recruit it in Isengard. He needs all the help he can get. Shadow player's down to his last die, and that's a card draw action die, so we can choose between a character event or a strategy event. And I think the Shadow player is going to take a strategy event. And that's going to bring the round to a close, and we'll get set up for a new round. All right, we'll begin the round by reclaiming our action dice. 5 for the Free Peoples with 1 faction die, 8 for the Shadow player with the Balrog die and a faction die. Free Peoples draw the action cards Wind from the West, Yomer, son of Yomund, and Speed greater than any wind. All those cards will be able to be kept. We're within our hand limit. Shadow player has drawn his event cards. He's going to be over his hand limit on the standard cards and on the faction cards, so he'll have to discard a random card from each of the decks. Character card and a faction card. Our fellowship phase, we have fellowship progress at 5, 1 corruption, and our last known position is Rivendell, and the guide is Smeagol. All right. And here is the Shadows Hunt allocation. No modifiers. Result is a 19. And that's going to be to place 3 dice into the hunt box. And here's the action rolls. All right, the Free Peoples have Muster Army, Will of the West, 2 muster die, and a draw or faction. I'll have to check that. I don't know those symbols too well. That's a recruit or draw faction die. And now the Shadows roll. And he's got another eye added into the pool. That'll be the 4th. We've got an army die, character die. The Balrog die is a draw card. Faction event is a recruit or draw, and a muster army. All right, each side has 6 action dice, so we can't pass. I think we're going to play a muster die, and we're going to use the event Yomer, Son of Yeoman. Recruit 1 Rohan unit, regular or elite, and 1 Rohan leader in a free Rohan region containing a settlement. All right. And I think we're going to select a Rohan leader and a Rohan elite, and we'll place them in Helm's Deep. It's a good card. Shadow player is up. He's got 6 action dice. Here's the gaze roll. Result is a 16, and that's Hunt for the Ring. Okay, we'll check our events. No, none of the event cards will be helpful in a Hunt for the Ring. So I think what we'll do is we're going to use a Buster Army die, and we're going to recruit. And we'll recruit 2 Nazgul. That could be helpful in our pursuit of the Hunt for the Ring. So we'll play a muster die, and we're going to recruit 1 in Moria and another in Dal Guldur. All right. All right, the Free Peoples are up next, and I think we might have an opportunity here. The question is do we launch the attack on Orthan with the forces we have, or do we reinforce it? And I would think we'd want to reinforce it. So I think we're going to use a muster army die, and we're going to activate some armies for movement. I think we'll move in these 2 forces into Fords of Isen, and we have 1 movement left. And I think we're going to move this force of elves with Mary. We'll move them from Cardolan into Tharbad. And maybe we can intercept some of those Saruman units in Dunland before they can help to reinforce Isengard. We'll try that. All right, the Shadow player is up. He rolls an 8, that's military matters, and we'll see where his focus lies. Result is an 11. And that's going to be in Umbar and Harad. Okay. I think they're going to play an army die, and we'll make some moves. We're going to move this force into Pelagar, creating a large army there that he can strike at either Langdon or Lossarnock. And our second move will be from near Harad to West Harandor. All right. So the Southrons are on the move. Free Peoples are up next, and they're going to use a muster army die, and we're going to launch an attack into Orthanc from the Fords of Isen. We'll set that up on the battle board. All right, Saruman is in a bad way, and I think he is going to withdraw into a siege. So he's going to go into the safety of Orthanc, and we're going to besiege Orthanc with Rohan forces led by Gandalf the White. All right, so Orthanc is under siege. We'll place a control marker in there so we know that they're under siege. What a chain of events here. All right, Shadow player will make his gaze roll. Rolls a 19, and that's Hunt for the Ring. Well, I think they're going to use a character action die, and they're going to move some minions. All right, I think they're going to move the Nazgul. We'll try to balance where the possible locations of the Fellowship might be. That's 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They could be as far south as Parth Celebrant or in Lorien. Well, I think what we can do is we'll move these Nazgul, one into Gladden Fields and another one into North Anduin Vale, and we'll try to get some rerolls possibly. It's about the best we can do. All right, the Free Peoples are up next. We have a Will of the West, a muster, and then a recruit or play faction card die. And, well, it might not be a bad idea to recruit another Ent. So I think we'll use that faction die, and we're going to recruit an Ent, and we can place 1 Ent in the Entwood. Rebuild the Ents. They did a great job. What an outstanding combination that was. With the Ents and then the Rohan forces retaking the Fords of Isen. All right, so we'll recruit an Ent in Fangorn. Here's the Shadow's gaze roll. Result is a 4, and that's Isengard. Well, I think Isengard is going to use an army die, and they're going to play this card, Half-orcs and goblin men play if Isengard is at war. Recruit one Isengard unit, regular or elite, in a region where a shadow army is present. All right, well, I think that applies even though we're under siege. I think we can still use that, pretty sure. So we're going to recruit, obviously, an elite unit, and we will place that in the siege box at Orthan. And that's what we'll do. I think that's a good play. I'm pretty sure you can do that because the card overrides the rules. Normally you can't recruit when you're under siege, but the card allows it. It says wherever there is a shadow army present, and we have one there, so we'll do it. Free Peoples are up next, and I think we're going to convert this Will of the West die into a army die. And we're going to launch an attack on Orthan. All right, this is the situation. We've got Saruman, and his forces are under siege. It's in a stronghold, so the attacker is going to need 6s during each round. Free Peoples have an elite, 2 regulars, 2 leaders, and Gandalf the White. So for the moment, our leader rerolls would be 1, 2, 3 for the Free Peoples. For the Shadow, it's going to be his elite acting as a leader and Saruman himself, so he's going to get 2. That's what it looks like right now. Now we'll have to decide about combat cards. And the Free Peoples will use this card, Valor. Play if a Free Peoples elite unit is in the battle, and they have one. Add 1 to all dice rolls on your combat. So we'll give them a +1 dice roll modifier. Now we have to decide what is Saruman going to do. He does have a faction unit there, the Dunlending, so that would allow him to use the call to battle cards possibly. We'll take a look at those first. All right, they will not be able to use call to battle because those cards are only when the Shadow Army is not under siege. So they'll have to make a roll to see if they're going to play a combat card. Currently there are 5 cards that can be played for combat, so we'll make a roll for the Shadow player. If he rolls less than a 5, he will play a combat card. Here's the roll. He rolled a 4, so he will be playing a combat card. We'll shuffle up his combat cards and we'll play one at a time until we get one that will work for this combat. Okay, first one is Durin's Bane. Play if the defending army is within 2 regions of Moria, or the Balrog is in the battle. Well, that one won't work. Next is Relentless Assault. Before the combat roll, you may inflict and apply up to 2 hits to your units. Add 1 to your dice roll on your combat for each hit you inflicted. Well, I don't think they want to play that one. They only have 2 regular units there. Then they've got Black Breath. Play if a Nazgul is in battle. No. Foul Stench. Play if a Nazgul leadership. They don't have that. And Great Host. If, after removing casualties from the combat roll and leader reroll, your army units are at least twice as many as the enemy army units, score an automatic hit. I don't think any of those cards would be played under this situation. So we'll put those back. And it looks like only the Free Peoples will be playing a combat card. So that's it. I did look at the Armed by Saruman card, and that says that the Dunlending figures in the same region as a Shadow Army add its combat strength when one of their call to battle effects is used, but they can't use the call to battle effects. It's prohibited when they're under siege. So this is what we've got. We've got 3 rerolls for the Free Peoples with a +1, and the Shadow player will get 2 rerolls. Combat dice will be equal to 1, 2, 3 for the Free Peoples and 2 for the Shadow. That's what they've got. So we'll launch the first round of combat. Shadow player is going to get 2 rerolls. We get 3, and we get +1 to our dice rolls. Here's the roll. All right, that's interesting. Got 2 hits. Now the leader rerolls will kick in, and we will do that. Each side had 1 dice to re-roll, so here's the roll. And no additional hits there. So that is what we've got. We'll take casualties now. Saruman has to take 2 hits. And I think all he can do is remove his elite unit. It'll suck up 2 of them. We have to take 1 hit, and we'll take a regular. And now we have to decide if we want to continue the battle. Don't really have enough forces. If we downgrade that elite, that would still give us a battle strength of 2, but we'd only hit on 6s because of being with the stronghold. And I don't have any more combat cards to play. Well, I do have some. Well, none of those combat cards are very good. It won't really help us. So I think we will cease the attack, and we'll take what we've got. Saruman is down to 1 unit. Yeah, I think we'll cease the attack and try to get some reinforcements in there. All right, so Saruman is in a bad way. That is for certain. Shadow player has 2 action dice left, and they're not very good ones. Here's the roll for the gaze table. Rolls a 4, and that's Isengard again. All right. Well, I think Isengard is going to use that faction die, and he's going to recruit. And we'll recruit some hillmen. And we can recruit 1 in each Dunland settlement or inside a shadow army in Isengard or Rohan. It won't help us too much because if we're under siege, those hillmen don't help very much. So I guess we'll recruit them in Dunland. All right, so they'll place 1 in South Dunland and in North Dunland. All right. Free Peoples have 1 action die left, and that is a muster die. So I think we're going to recruit in Helm's Deep, and we'll bring in an elite into Helm's Deep. And that'll help maybe in the assault on Isengard. Shadow player is down to his last die, and all he has is a Balrog die, which will allow him a card draw. I guess he would take a strategy card, so we'll give him 1 of those, and that's going to bring the round to a close. All right, each side has recovered their action dice, and the Free Peoples have drawn the cards House of the Stewards, Grimbjorn, the Old, son of Bjorn, and We Only Need Wings. So all those cards can be kept. We're within our hand limit. Shadow player has drawn his events, and he's over his hand limit again. So he'll have to discard 2 standard and 1 faction event. We'll move on to the fellowship phase, and the fellowship is going to declare. They have 5 progress, so we're going to move them 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they're going to declare in Lorien. And that will allow them to heal 1 point of corruption. They'll move their progress down to 0 and corruption to 0. So the fellowship has made it to Lorien. Now, in doing so, that means that Smeagol is removed. And our guide will once again become Strider. All right. Shadow player will make his hunt allocation roll. Now there's going to be a die roll modifier for this. It's going to be -1 if a shadow player's stronghold is besieged, and it is. Orthan is besieged. So we'll have a -1 on this roll. Result is a 2. That's down to a 1, and that is none. So the hunt allocation is going to be 0. I don't believe any progress was made during the last turn, so they're not required to place a die in the hunt box. All right. Now it's our action roll. All right, the Free Peoples have a Will of the West, recruit or draw, faction, character, muster, and muster army. That is their selections for that roll. And here is the shadow roll. They got a lot of dice. Whoops. Okay, we've got an eye, one eye. Okay, now that is with a star. Now we don't have the Witch King in play, so we don't have to remove the die from the pool. That's good. We've got a recruit or play faction event, character, muster army, muster army, muster army, army, and 3 more army. So what do I have that right? That's a muster die. Muster army, muster army, muster army, muster 3 army, recruit or play, and a character die. That's what they have. And then the eye has been placed in the hunt box. Well, Free Peoples are up first, and I think we're going to take a character die and make a fellowship progress. We've only got 1 eye in the hunt box. It's a good opportunity. So the fellowship has arrived in Lorien. We're going to use a character die, move their advancement up 1 to 1, and now we'll have a hunt roll. There's only 1 die in the box, so not a very good chance for the shadow player. Okay, here is his roll. He rolled a 1, so that's nothing there. We'll place this one in the hunt box for a +1 die roll modifier in the future, and that is going to bring that to a close. All right, shadow player is up. Here's his gaze roll. Result is a 2. That's Isengard. Well, Isengard is definitely going to be using an army die, and they're going to make 2 movements, and I think what they'll do is they've got to get a force in the gap of Rohan to try to get relief. So they'll move this entire force into the gap of Rohan. You've got that elven army there. I guess we'll have to leave 1 behind. And then for the next movement, I guess we could move this Dunlanding and 1 more from north to south Dunland, and we've at least got a garrison in those places. I guess that's all he can do. Free Peoples player up next, and this is a tough one. How to handle this? We've got forces closing on our besieged Orthan, trying to relieve it, and we don't have a lot of forces in the area. So let's take a look at that area. So Isengard has a relief force coming. We have some forces at Helm's Deep and Edoras, but it's going to take a little bit for them to get there. We could launch an attack at Orthan, I guess. That's probably what we should do. So I think they'll use a muster army die, and we're going to launch a siege attack against Orthan. We'll set that up on the board. All right, so we have set the forces up on the battle board. Saruman is down to his last regular unit. We have an elite and a regular and 2 leaders with Gandalf the White. He has 3 rerolls at the moment. Saruman just has the 1 now for himself. So, shadow player will be gaining 1 die, and we'll be gaining 2, and we need 6s. So now we have to decide on combat cards. Well, we really don't have any good combat cards we can play. I think the best one we could use is Orderly Withdrawal, and that says play if a Free People's leader or companion is in a field battle. Before you remove casualties inflicted by your opponent's combat roll and leader reroll, you may cancel 1 hit. If you do so, you must cease the attack. Well, I guess we will play that. That's probably the best we can do, so we'll play that Orderly Withdrawal card. And now the shadow player, he has a total of 6 cards that could be played for combat. We know that we can't use the call to battle at this point. We can't enact it because we're under siege. So any roll except a 6 would play a combat card. And they rolled a 2, so they will try to play a combat card. And I've checked the combat cards. None of them can be played in this battle. Most of them deal with Nazgul being present. So that is the situation. We'll make the roll and see what happens here. The attacking forces have to have a 6 though. Okay, here is the roll. We do have some re-rolls. Everybody rolled a 1, so there's nothing there. We'll use our re-rolls and that'll re-roll all of those. And we have a 6. And Saruman has a 5. So each side is going to inflict 1 hit. And that's enough. We've taken out Orthan. We'll take our regular as a casualty. Saruman has no choice but to take the Isengard regular. He has no more forces left. The Dunlendings can't help him. So we have conquered Orthan. And so with the results of that battle, Saruman is removed from play. So is the Dunlending. That is amazing. So Orthan has fallen to Rohan. That is going to give the Free Peoples 2 victory points. We get 2 more, we're going to win. It is absolutely amazing. All right, the Shadow player is up next. Sauron's Gaze Table. There's going to be no modifiers for this. All right, here is the roll. Roll is a 17, and that's going to be the ring. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to use a recruit faction die, and we're going to bring the Broods of Shelob into play. And that is going to help it possibly in the search for the ring. Starting setup is we place a spider in Dol Guldur and 1 in Minas Morgul. All right. So we've got a spider in Dol Guldur, and 1 will be in Minas Morgul, and the Broods of Shelob now are active. All the shadow factions are in play now. Occasionally there are faction events that allow Broods of Shelob to hunt for the ring, so that is why I made that selection. And now it is the Free Peoples, and I think we're going to use a muster die, and we're going to do some recruiting. And I think Gondor is going to recruit a regular in Minas Tirith. That'll put them up to a total of 5 combat units. And then we will recruit another one in Dal Amroth. All right. All right, the Shadow player will make his gaze roll. The roll is a 14. That's going to be military matters. So we'll make a roll on the chart. See where the focus is lying. Result is a 6, and that's going to be Dol Guldur and Moria. And I think we're going to use an army die, and we're going to activate the second army, and they are going to launch an attack on Lorien. So the choices are for the elves. They can fight the field battle at a disadvantage, or they can retreat into siege, and I think that's what they're going to do. So the Shadow's second army is moving into Lorien, and they will besiege them. Now the Fellowship is there as well, but they're immune to those armies for the moment. So we'll mark Lorien with a Fellowship control marker to show that we're under siege there. And the only consideration now is, does the second army leave behind a unit in Dimril Dale? Probably not. So that is the extent of that army die. We use that for an attack. Free Peoples are up next, and I think we're going to use the Will of the West die, and we're going to use that as a muster die. And we're going to bring Lady Galadriel into the game. So the prerequisites for Lady Galadriel are, if Sauron or the elves are at war and Lorien is unconquered, you may use a muster action die result to play Lady Galadriel, and that's what we're going to do. So that muster die is played. Lady Galadriel will enter Lorien, and she's going to gain her Nenya die. That'll be added to the pool next turn. All right. And she has a very powerful ability, and that is to allow the elves to recruit while she's even under siege. That's big. All right, the shadow player is up next. Here's the gaze roll. Result is a 12. That is military matters. And we'll see where the focus lies. Result is a 3. And that is going to be Angmar or Ruin. And the shadow player is going to use an army die, and we're going to launch an attack from Angmar into Etten Moors. All right, we've set it up on the battle board. We've got an elite and 2 regulars attacking an elite north unit. No terrain effects, and there are no leaderships. So the Free Peoples will get 1 die, and the shadow player is going to gain 3 for the moment. Now we'll see about combat cards. And I think we're going to use the combat card Scouts. Before combat roll, retreat your army to an adjacent free region or withdraw into a siege. So that's what they'll do. Shadow player will roll to see if he's going to play a combat card. He needs to get less than a 6. And he did. So we'll see if he can play a combat card. And they have a card they can play, and that is Relentless Assault. Before the combat roll, you may inflict and apply up to 2 hits against your units. Add 1 to the dice roll, combat roll for each hit inflicted. They don't know that we've played Scouts already. Scouts has a initiative of 1. This card is a 3, so the Scouts will kick in first. We burn the card, but that's how it goes. And we will retreat from combat. So we're going to retreat. Question is, where do we go? It's either Trollshaws, Weather Hills, North Downs, or Arnor. And I think it would probably make most sense. I guess to the Weather Hills. Shadow player can advance. And the question is, does he leave a unit behind in Angmar or not? That is the question. I think he'll advance with everything for right now. We can always recruit there. So that is the situation in the north. All right, the Free Peoples have a character die, and I think we're going to try a move. Right now in the pool, there is 1 eye, and we've already used 1 character die this turn, so it'll be at a +1, but we'll do the Fellowship Progress. Fellowship Progress will move to 2 now, and the shadow player will make his Hunt for the Ring. He's going to get a +1 on this, so a 5 or 6 will be successful. Here's the roll. He rolls a 1, so he's failed. And we'll place that 2nd character die in the hunt box, but he's made no progress. All right. All right, shadow player is up next, and he'll make his Soren's gaze roll. Result is a 20, and that's Hunt for the Ring. Well, none of the event cards would be real helpful at this point, so I think we're going to probably try to move some forces to get some hunt rerolls in the future. So the shadow will play a muster army die, and we can make some moves. And I think we will move this force from North Ithilien into the Dead Marshes. We'll do that. Next move will be force in Gladden Fields. We'll move them into Dimrell Dale. All right. All right, Free Peoples have 1 die left. They can either pass or use a draw or recruit faction. And I think they're going to recruit the Eagles in the Misty Mountains with that. It says if the Fellowship's last position is not in Rivendell, get the card out. If the Fellowship's last position is not in Rivendell or the Gandalf the White is in play, you may use 1 muster or recruit faction die to bring the Eagles into play. So we'll do that. And that will bring 2 Eagles into Eagles Eyrie. All right. And so we'll place 2 Eagles in Eagles Eyrie. And that will be our 2nd faction. All right, the Free Peoples are out of action dice, so the Shadow's going to be taking 4 turns in a row. Here's the gaze roll. Result is an 11. That's military matters, and we'll see where his focus is. Rolls a 15, and I believe that is Mordor. Yes, it is. All right. All right, so our focus is on Mordor. So the choices would be, we could bring Gothmog in. That would be an option. We could use a muster die and bring him in. We could launch an attack on Minas Tirith from the First Army. That's another option. The other option is to bring the Witch King in. And that says, if Sauron and at least one Free People's nation are at war, you may use 1 muster action die to place the Witch King in any region with a shadow army that includes at least 1 Sauron unit. Activate all Free People's nations. Okay, well, we're going to do that. We'll play the muster die. That means that the dwarves are now active, and we're going to bring in the Black Captain. So we're going to place the Black Captain into the First Army. He's also going to award us another faction die for next round, so that is good. Shadow player will make his next gaze roll, and that is a 19, and that's a hunt for the ring. Well, the Fellowship is currently in Lorien, and they have a hunt progress of 2, or a Fellowship progress of 2, so they could be in East Emnet, they could be in Western Emion Mule, and they could also be in Western Brownlands. So it looks like these would be the most likely places for them to be. So we'll try to get some units in those areas. So we'll use a character die, and we're going to move this army with the Nazgul into Western Emlyn Mule. We'll do that. Shadow player has 2 dice left. We'll make their gaze roll. Result is a 10. That's military matters. And the focus is a 16, and that's Mordor. And I think it's time to launch the attack on Minas Tirith. So we're going to use a muster army die, activating the First Army and attacking Minas Tirith. And considering the size of that army, I think Minas Tirith will go into a siege. So we're going to move the entire First Army into Minas Tirith and besiege that. Place a Fellowship marker in that spot to mark that they are under siege. All right. Shadow player is down to his last die, so we have to decide what to do. And I think we'll use that muster army die, and we're going to move 2 armies. And I think what we'll do is we'll move this force of Southrons into Osgiliath. It'll give us some ability to reinforce Minas Tirith when the time comes. And I think the second army we're going to move is going to be this force out of Morannon, and we'll move them to the Noman lands. We'll try to get them up and maybe attack Dale. All right. And that's the end of the turn. And I think rather than going to a 4th video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete most of the game off camera. And we'll return with the closing turn or turns of the game at its conclusion. And then I will come back and give you my thoughts on how I think the Shadowbot is operating. Well, it took several turns, quite a few, to get to the completion of the game from where we left off. It ends up, Fellowship dropped the ring into the crack of doom, and they won the game. Shadow player was at 6 victory points when the game ended, and they were in a position to take another 4, probably very quickly. They were on the doorstep of Dal Amroth. They had captured Minas Tirith. They captured the Grey Havens. They captured the Shire. And they captured Peligir. So they were in a pretty good position. They almost were ready to put a final strike onto Lorien as well. So it could have gone either way. As for the rules, they worked pretty good. I'm pretty happy. I'm going to be instituting one final change to the rules, and this is kind of a big one. And basically, once the Fellowship reaches the Mordor track, I'm going to suspend all rolls on Sauron's gaze table. The Shadow player's dice can be used at will, and you would use those to best effect under the current game situation, either playing cards to attack the Fellowship on the Mordor track, or using your military dice to complete your conquest, and it becomes a race then, of course, just like in a real game. So that is the only change that I'm going to make to the rules, and I will be reissuing them. It'll end up to be rule set 3.43. Will include that extra addition to the rules about once the Fellowship reaches the Mordor track, and it plays out very well that way. So thanks so much for tuning in for this series, and I hope you enjoyed it. This is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club, signing off and wishing everyone a pleasant evening. Good night.